This week on Theater Talk.
When I come to review Spider-Man, it will be certainly be relevant for me to talk about how much it cost and how much grief they went through. But I'll get that out of the way immediately and then bring the news, which is, so, was it good? Was it bad? Did you clean your plate? You know, we'll find out.
Exactly.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskett.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, the season is half over, and it's time for us to assess what has gone up so far.
And do a little damage with the wrecking crew, as the New York drama critics are known as. We're going to take a look at the shows thus far, midway through the Broadway season. What's been good, what's been bad, what's going to close or what should close, and maybe look ahead to some of the stuff that's coming up in the spring. And we are joined tonight by our old friend Jacques Lesourd of CBS Radio. Jacques, welcome back to Theater Talk.
Thank you.
Good to have you with us. Making his first ever appearance on Theater Talk, a critic that I am very fond of, Terry Teachout of the Wall Street Journal. Terry, welcome to Theater Talk.
Good to be here.
And our other old friend, John Simon of the Westchester Guardian, the Yonkers Tribune, and a contributor to the Standard magazine, where he has a new article on Noel Coward in this month's issue. John, welcome to
Standard.
the Weekly Standard. Welcome to Theater Talk, John.
Thank you.
I just want to say, John, for a long time you were with Bloomberg News, and you were let go recently. I'm sorry to hear that. What are your feelings about
Well,
that?
the only strong feelings are that they, through some misunderstanding on both our sides, I guess, they announced that I was retiring. I have no intention whatsoever of retiring. I will retire feet forward or not at all.
I want to so go ahead, yeah.
So I'm still open for any gigs that anyone wishes to employ me.
Now, gentlemen, as critics, is this a profession where you just don't retire as drama critics? Are you going to go on forever, Terry?
I guess. I've come to it late in life, so maybe my tolerance is higher or lower.
And Jacques, you were...
Is it still a profession?
Well, Jacques, you had been with Gannett Newspapers for
35 years.
and got caught in the layoffs and the
No, I was fired.
You were trying to be polite.
Not to put too fine a
Point
point
on it, yeah.
But I mean, you're still a drama critic
Well,
with CBS.
CBS
I mean,
has-
once you guys start as drama critics, there's no way out, it seems.
When they get the hook in our lips, you know it's all over.
That's right. All right, let's talk about some of the shows that we are seeing on Broadway right now. The one show that seems to me to be the genuine hit of the season is Al Pacino in The Merchant of Venice, which I believe is going to be extended on Broadway because it's doing so well.
I am a Jew. That's not a Jew eyes. That's not a Jew hand.
John, Al Pacino is one of the great American stage actors. How does he fare as Shylock?
Well, he gives the most conventional possible performance, but that's okay. I think that's what Shakespeare would have wanted. He makes him a repulsive Jew, and it's obviously an anti-Semitic role, and it's played to the hilt. And there's any attempt to sort of tone down that sort of thing usually misfires.
Terry, you're...
He's playing a stage Jew. That's the way I put it in my review. And it's deliberate. I think it fits well into the concept of the production. It makes sense. It's a remarkable production, I think. He's not the most remarkable thing in it.
What is?
I think the staging itself, the production and
By
design.
Dan Sullivan, the director. Yeah.
It's set in a Vicwardian brokerage house. And the objective is to create an environment in which the treatment of Shylock makes sense. I mean, it is unquestionably anti-Semitic, but they're trying to create a context where the anti-Semitism would make historical sense.
Right. Jacques, you like...
Lily Rabe, I think.
Who plays Portia?
The quality of mercy is not strained.
May I speak up at this point? I think Lily Rabe is the most overrated actress on the entire
Here we
Broadway.
go.
I think
What
she
makes you
is-
say that,
I do not concur.
First,
Neither do I.
profoundly unattractive,
Oh,
with a
Sean.
strident voice, a unpleasant strident voice, and no special acting talent.
Don't ever let it be said you're misogynistic.
John Simon.
I'm not.
John Simon.
Sorry. I'm anti Lily Abe.
I feel I should defend her,
Yes,
but I don't.
All right, boys, jump in. You
What
gotta-
he said, not.
Exactly.
That leaves
But
me.
wait, but I want. But now we were to be joined today by Linda Weiner, who was called away with a Spider-Man emergency.
Oh, she would have
And-
defended.
but I want to
Oh, the
say
girl has to defend
I
her.
know, but I want to go back to Al Pacino's performance. I don't feel he came off as a repulsive Jew, as you put it, John Simon, at all. I thought that he so artfully was
I'm not answering
very
that.
sympathetic, and
yeah,
and
especially.
that
Let's
he
say-
was such a nuanced, wonderful performance. And I'm not
is
an
my
Al
humor.
Pacino freak, but that I thought moment by moment, even when he was just threatening to carve the pound of flesh, you really were kind of with this guy, this scrappy little man who was very appealing at the same time.
He's riveting,
It was
and
a
the
wonderful
and the
performance.
baptism scene,
The
is-
forced baptism. scene.
Forced is one of the most powerful and heartbreaking.
And you felt that the
scenes.
people, that he was bullied, they took his daughter away, and and that he became almost like the protagonist. I was with him.
Well, Susan, I mean, I think that what you were talking about is the effect of the production on our perception of the performance. They created a context in which Shylock can be sympathetic without giving a performance by the Shylock actor where it's watered down.
Now, on the subject of anti-Semitism, Vanessa Redgrave, the star of Driving Miss Daisy.
While
Is
we're
that a
at it.
segue we can get sued on?
Well, we know Vanessa Redgrave has been
Well, she's pro-Palestinian.
pro-Palestinian. A lot of Jewish groups have been against her all these years for some of the things she said, but she's playing a Jewish woman in Driving Miss Daisy with James Earl Jones. Does this sweet little play still hold up, John?
I think so. I think it's a charming play. I think it's not earth-shaking or world-beating, but in its own way, it's a very likable play. And of course, the acting could not be better. And the staging, I think, is good too. I think the stage picture is good by a good set designer. I think it has everything it can possibly have.
I was struck by how fragmentary it seemed. I had seen the original production, and then, of course, I saw the movie, which really fleshed it out. And then 20 years went by, or whatever it is, and it was almost like watching sketches. You know, the sketches of a play. It was not really right, which works. They make it work. Of course, the two of them are so marvelous. But it was really much more fragmentary than I remembered it being.
Terry, you want to say something about Vanessa Redgrave and James Earl Jones
Well,
together?
they're wonderful, but John actually nailed it. And I looked up your review of the original production, and John was one of the people who, when the play first opened, recognized that it's a good play. It's not just a star turn. It's actually, I mean, it's not Shakespeare, but it is a very good and solid piece of writing. And I think maybe the fragmentary quality that you noticed, Jacques, might have had something to do with the use of projections between the scenes, which I think sort of unglues the flow of the play a bit. It's a little too, that's the one thing I didn't like about it, was that was a little too elaborate, maybe even a little heavy-handed for me. One of the nice things about the play is that it doesn't beat you over the head with the historical context.
Right.
It just lets it happen in the background. And in this production, you have projections which remind you, oh yes, civil rights movement, like a flashing sign. And,
It's interesting. I continue to get emails, though, from groups that after all these years are still angry at Vanessa Redgrave. These kind of things that the actors do off stage, her statements and pro-Palestinian and all this, have no impact on anything you guys ever assess when you go to the theater. Do you think about the personalities of these people you're reviewing, or any drama surrounding them personally?
I should hope not.
that's not what we're there for.
I should hope not. That would be a terrible mistake.
Well, let me ask you, we have this show coming up called Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, you may have heard of.
I don't know that.
I keep reading about it.
I'm curious about this because it's been in the papers almost every day now. Every backstage problem, every set that doesn't work, everybody who's injured, all the money problems. Do you guys read this stuff? Do you track it? Do you
Never
follow
a
it?
word. Who's writing about this?
But you know,
Avidly.
things are so awful, they should change the title, Turn on the Dark. We don't want to see any of these horrors if we can avoid.
So it does have an impact on
Of
you
course,
to some
how
extent.
could it
going in.
not? How could it not?
And you,
It-
Terry?
It doesn't on me. I mean, of course, I'm aware. You always know what's going on, and now in the age of the internet, you know it even more immediately, even more intensely. So when I go to the theater, Sometimes I see the black cloud over the building. But, you know, I tell you, though, honestly, when I sit down in the seat and the lights go down, it's like a switch turns. And I'm seeing the show. And the reason why I know this is true is because even now I'm still capable of being surprised by shows that I expected to be good that turned out to be bad, and vice versa. That's my reality check. So I feel pretty confident in saying that even though I know what the buzz is, I don't bring it to the performance.
And you, Jacques?
Walter Kerr used to claim he never read anything about a show ahead of time. You know, he just walked in cold. But of course, as Terry says, we can't really insulate ourselves totally. But I do think there's just this. The minute the curtain goes up, or if there's not a curtain, the lights go on, we're really quite free of that sort of buzz.
But
Do you-
Michael,
Susan has got some
now here
crazy
we go.
thing that nobody should write about
No,
shows and
but
previews.
all right, boom. But Michael, you went into the first preview of Spider-Man. You were on TV a great deal. Sometimes they referred to you as a critic, and so now we have this precedent set of a so-called critic, although you're really a columnist, going in and reviewing the first preview. Do you think that that's kosher?
It's inevitable
It's
when
what
you
it
when
is.
you start the previews in the city instead of
Yeah,
taking the
yeah.
show out of town.
Let me ask you this: you feel though, in a way, you're as critics, you're diminished to some extent because you're not going to see the show until January. It's already been written and talked about.
Critics are diminished generally, in part thanks to you, Michael.
Well, that's what I was saying.
That's
Right.
what he was saying. Diminished and denuded.
I don't think anybody needs to diminish critics. They diminish themselves very well, especially certain critics one knows.
What do you mean?
Oh,
Let's.
present
Company unmentioned.
How do you feel about it, Terry? Though I mean, by the time you guys come in, everybody has an opinion on the internet. It's all come out.
Yeah, well, of course, but anybody who actually knows anything about theater knows that shows are getting changed up to maybe a week before the opening night. And when we see it, at least theoretically, the show is frozen and has reached its final form. I mean, that's been the case with some of the shows that have opened this season, in which we knew that changes were being made up to the next and last moment. And
Your stuff is great fun to read, but it's beside the point because the only thing that is the point is the show when it starts.
I like to
It's-
think
it's-
I'm softening it up for you guys.
Yeah,
well,
no,
it's not our
no,
job
it's beside
to
the
report on what's happening on the other side of the proscenium.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about the show. What happens when the curtain, not that there are many curtains left anymore, but what happens when the lights go up. That's what we're writing about.
if we have a mind of our own and a style of our own, the fact that a lot has been written before makes no difference.
There are certain unnamed
We put
critics.
our own stamp on it.
There are certain unnamed critics who do load the review with a lot of gossip that wasn't. I don't think it belongs there. It annoys
Well,
me
we should
when
say Ben Brantley at the New York Times has been known to
Yes.
kind of front load his reviews, referring to all the
does.
gossip that's come the night before.
I think,
don't like that.
As a guy who writes for a newspaper, I think that I do have an obligation, if there is an important backstory connected to the show, to mention it. But that's all.
But that's all.
I mean, that's part of the lead, but it's not part of my opinion of the show. When I come to review Spider-Man, it will certainly be relevant for me to talk about how much it cost and how much grief they went through. But I'll get that out of the way immediately and then bring the news, which is, so, was it good? Was it bad? Did you clean your plate? We'll find out.
Exactly. I want to talk about the greatest living American playwright in the estimation of some people, Tony Kushner. His masterpiece, his epic masterpiece, Angels in America, has been revived off-Broadway at the Signature Theater Company. A lot of attention and publicity is always showered on Tony Kushner. John, does he live up to his hype?
Well, it's a very long play, which, like a very long landscape, will have hills and valleys, hills and valleys. So the play has high points and low points. I think there's some very good moments in it. There are also some very dull moments in it. There are some things that are a bit ludicrous. There are other things that are quite touching. It's a mixed bag, and I accept it as such. I don't see it as a masterpiece. I don't see it for the ages. But it's very timely, or was timely, and still is in some ways.
But Terry, it has been proclaimed by many academics a masterpiece, a great American dramatic masterpiece.
Well, I think that's absolute nonsense. It's been very influential. it will have an important place in theater history because of how timely it was. And Tony Kushner can write a scene as well as or better than anyone around. And there are scenes in Angels in America which completely sweep you up. I mean, in particular, the scenes in which the Roy Cohn character is on stage. But I think as a totality, it's like all of Tony Kushner's other very long plays that go on forever and have good moments and bad moments. And you wish the good moments were consecutive. And they're not even close to consecutive. And there are a lot more of them in the first part than there are in the second part.
Yeah.
The second part, I think, actually descends to outright sentiment.
It's funny. A lot of people think the second part is a lot better than the first.
Yeah, they're suckers for sentiment, I think. But I mean, sure, there are wonderful moments in this play, and as I say, it's going to be in the books. But I don't think it's anybody's masterpiece, not by my judgment.
And it's interesting that it was such a future-looking. It was, what, 8 years from the millennium, and it was all this, what is the millennium going to be? And as a friend of mine said the other day, he didn't come close to guessing how awful the 21st century was going to be. Didn't come close. So that
Missed
makes
it by a mile.
Listen, anybody who goes long on the future is asking for trouble.
Jacques, if I remember correctly, you weren't really taken by the play the first time around, but you liked this production.
I think the cast is actually better
This time around,
In many specifics. I think the cast is better, and I think it's well directed, and you don't sit there saying, why the hell are they reviving this? I mean, it really is an interesting, and I'm not a fan of this director in the past, Michael Greif,
who did Rent famously.
Yeah, a lot of things I wasn't really crazy about, but I think he's handled it very well. Keeps your attention for 18 hours or whatever the length is. And I didn't do it in one day. Did you do it in one day?
No.
John? No. I heard some people did. Now that's beyond the call.
Life's too short.
Yeah.
You haven't seen Spider-Man yet.
Well, some people are suckers for punishment, we know that. But I disagree. I think the original cast in many ways was better than this cast.
That cast was Joe
Chalfant.
Mantello, Kathleen Chalfant,
Stephen
Well, I
Spinoff.
mean, Roy Cohn was much better.
Ron Lehman. Right?
Yeah, more
I think-
terrifying. This guy's a little too nice.
Who is this guy?
Well,
Frank Wood. I like him as an actor.
And we all know from Side.
yes, and he's always played wimps. I think it's interesting casting because he always plays wimps or at least passive-aggressive characters. And here, that mouth thing, that's sort of, it's like a Francis Bacon painting. He has this open mouth. And I found it really terrifying in a totally different way than Roy Cohn was, as I knew him. And
I was going to say, you knew Roy Cohn.
At Studio 54,
No,
right?
other, but I wouldn't. But there was that, and the original actor,
Ron Lehman.
Ron Lehman, had of course a more immediate, and of course Al Pacino. To return to Al Pacino, I think is
Did it
the
in a-
ultimate Roy Cohn in the film version.
Terry, I do want to ask you about the Roy Cohn issue for a moment, because they used to say about Shaw's plays that sometimes the villain, the person you would see in the villainous plays, the play got away with the villain. Undershaft in some of the plays, the most interesting character. Is that what happens with Angels in America, that the most interesting character is Roy Cohn, the bad guy?
I think so, and what I was thinking about as I was watching is it's something that Herbert von Karajan said, the famous conductor, which was that if he had written Tosca, he would have called it Scarpia. After the villain. And I think that if Angels in America had been about Roy Cohn and had been a single evening play, it wouldn't have made the splash that it did because it wouldn't have been an event. But I think it might have been a better play.
Yes, and if somebody else had written it,
Yeah.
and,
And very quickly, Jacques, Roy Cohn, you knew him, was he a really
Well, I
scary
didn't
person?
know him. I had dinner with him a couple of times.
He was your lawyer, wasn't he?
No.
And was it scary to have
He
dinner
was a
with Roy Cohn?
fascinating man who ate his salad out of my salad plate with his fingers, reached across. He was notorious for that. And I think it was one of those cases where you were there and you said, this is Roy Cohn, he is very scary. It was, in the moment, but he was fascinating.
well, isn't the salad always greener in the other man's plate?
Yes, but then you climbed into his Rolls Royce.
All right.
Do we have time? Because
Yeah, sorry, you want to say?
well, you had the John Guare play.
Yes, we're gonna
You
talk
liked
about it,
lot. Okay,
The-
because that's an event because it's long.
Yes, John Guare has a new play, Free Man of Color, which had been touted as a very important new play at Lincoln Center. It was supposed to be done at the Public Theater, and it fell through, but it's been put together by Lincoln Center. Terry, you like this play. You think it is a masterpiece.
I like it very much. I didn't say it. I thought for sure it was a masterpiece. You don't know that on the first viewing of anything. But I was enormously impressed by it, and I was, I confess, quite surprised to see that most of my colleagues simply didn't like it at all. It was worked on right to the last minute.
Yeah.
By the time I got to it, I think the running time was down to 2:15 or 2:20, which is, you know, well within the realm of the normal for a stage play. And I thought it was a very beautiful and compelling
Can you
piece
tell
of work.
tell us what it's about, though, for people who haven't seen it? Just
Well, it's an attempt to write a kind of updated restoration comedy about a figure from history who lived in New Orleans before the fall, so to speak, before New Orleans was invaded by racial segregation. And the notion is that this was the time before racism moved in on this kind of pre-lapsarian society, which was New Orleans.
So before the Louisiana
Right,
Purchase.
before the Louisiana
sounds
Purchase.
riveting, I gotta say.
Well,
That's an interesting story, yeah.
I mean, it's a history play, but it's an immensely funny and outrageous one in the first act. And in the second act, when history catches up with the principal character and suddenly he's sold into slavery, it becomes, I think, a very poetic play, very strikingly poetic. Mine is a minority view, but
Gorgeous
I'd
scenery and
stand on it.
costumes. It felt a little like a time trip. I mean, it's back to the early '80s when people had money for productions.
Yeah.
I guess Lincoln Center still has money for costumes and sets, which, you know, is a nice thing. now.
John, what did you think of Free Men of Color?
I thought it was a mess by an intelligent man, to be sure, and by someone who had done his research perhaps a little too well and had to bring it
Put
forth
it all in. Yeah.
It may be that the 5-hour version with which it began
It was better.
was better.
you know,
In two parts.
I wondered about that because sometimes you can cut a show so much that you start to lose a grip on the continuity. I didn't think that had happened, but I would like to have seen a longer version of it.
I thought it was herky-jerky. There were too many characters, too many short scenes, too many disconnections, too many impossibilities of picking up what this was referring back to. And no one was there long enough to make a mark. Even the leading character couldn't quite make you care about him.
Jeffrey Wright.
He makes you care for Tony Kushner.
We have 1 minute. We want to talk about Lincoln Center's other.
Oh, yeah, and
yes.
Lincoln Center had a very, by all accounts, I think, a flop now called Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. That was supposed to be the big breakout musical of the season, but it didn't break out. Jacques?
Well, you know, I don't think the movie was that good to start with. I think
The
everybody
Almodovar
went
movie,
with a 20-year-old memory of the movie and said, how dare they make this play? But I heard something about this play that's kind of amazing, that how bad must a play be for all the gay men in the audience to leave an intermission when the big and when the big number for Patti LuPone is in the second act, and they know it is, but they still leave an intermission.
Terry, what is your assessment of? You stayed for the second act.
I stayed for the
I
second
did
act.
too, by the way. I want to say
the only
I
gay
never
man who
leave.
stayed.
Yeah.
I thought it was a disaster, an unmemorable score. It was hectic in the ways that John is describing a Free Man of Color. I mean, and I went back and looked at the movie again to refresh my 20-year-old memories of it. It was as good as I remembered, and the musical just doesn't touch it. Doesn't touch it.
Any production that can make Laura Benanti look bad has to be
We
really.
found an actress John likes.
I
Laura
concur.
Benanti, yes.
Laura
I agree.
Benanti's beautiful.
I agree.
She's wonderful.
She has everything.
She almost
can
came
sing.
close to trying to save the show.
How's Patti LuPone in it?
Who knows? They left it. No,
I mean, do the actresses
Well,
at least...
in a
she works
blonde
hard.
wig, that was already a big problem.
big hat.
She has
No,
nothing.
but-
She has nothing to work
Yeah,
with.
but she's delivering Patti LuPone to this show. The show just is there for her.
Yeah, I mean, when you can't remember how her big song goes,
Yes,
there is
that's-
something seriously amiss with the score.
Well, we're done.
true.
My favorite show this fall has been Pee Wee Herman. That's all of us.
But wear a sweater because the theater's freezing cold.
We have to wrap it up, gentlemen, but I do want to ask you one question about the state of your profession. You know, for the last 2 years, we've been seeing critics losing their jobs, diminishment of power, newspapers in trouble. Is theater criticism going to be with us, John?
Well, I hope so. Although, of course, I have a vested interest
Yes.
in.
We hope you're with us.
Yeah, but it looks very serious.
Perry, your sense of where your profession's headed?
There will always be theater criticism. It may not always be in newspapers, as it is no longer essentially in magazines. I mean, it's become decentralized. It's become, in a sense, deprofessionalized. Much of the interesting commentary on theater now takes place on the web. I'm very lucky. I write for a national newspaper for a national audience. I seem to be afloat, but these are dire times for
Will it be
professional
written in
criticism.
more than 140 characters?
Everybody's
Twitter
a
has
critic.
this.
The point is everybody's a critic now with the internet.
Is there anything wrong with that, though? I mean, what makes you guys better than anybody else writing out there?
It's because we've dedicated our lives, such as they are, to
when it
being,
laughably called our lives.
to being critics, and that makes a difference.
Ultimately, it's the people who read us or don't read us who will make that decision, not us.
True.
They're too busy writing.
Yes.
That's right. Jacques Lesseur from CBS Radio, Terry Teachout from the Wall Street Journal, John Simon from the Westchester Guardian, and what's the Yonkers paper?
The Tribune.
The Yonkers Tribune.
And
you-
your new blog.
And a new blog that's
Oh,
coming.
what is the blog?
Tell the URL.
The blog
is-
will be called John Simon Uncensored.
Whoa! Don't read it, Lily Rabe. Thank you, gentlemen.
And good night.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.